This is Pastor Tim from Central Texas from the Bend and Lomita United Methodist Churches, two small rural churches who have a big heart and a big ministry. We are excited to stay United Methodist, to be nurtured by the church as it also gave us birth. If you're interested in if your church has left you, then you might want to connect with us. We have worship at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. We do it on Facebook, and you can be a part of us. Just let us know in the comments. We're talking about some of the stories of the Bible because I think that to be literate in the Bible, you have to know the stories. We have a historical religion. It's not eternal in terms of truths, and it's about history. It's about how we encounter God. That's what the Bible is. It's a book of history. It's not the only thing it is. It's about who God is, but how God relates to history. So we tell the stories because they carry the weight of the faith. Now we're going to talk about Samuel today. Samuel was his mother wanted to have a baby, but she was barren, and it's oftentimes in the Bible that there is a barrenness, either persons or places, that God does amazing things. But she was in the temple praying, and the high priest Eli heard her, and so he thought that she was so miserable and so hysterical that she must be drunk. And he went to talk to her, and then found out she wasn't. And he just offhandedly says, well, God will grant your request to have a child. Because that was very important to her. It's very important to the people of Israel because that was your Social Security. That was your insurance of continuing in its existence as a family. It's the way you got taken care of. It's the way you passed on your inheritance. And so she really wanted to have a child. And she did have a child, but she made a promise to God that she would give her child to God if she was able to have a child. And so that's what she did. When he was old enough to be away from his mother, when he was probably 4 or 5 years old, she took Samuel and gave him to the high priest Eli. I'm sure that Eli, in his old age, because he had grown children, probably thought, what in the heck am I going to do with this little baby, with this little kid? But they had ways of putting him to work, to do some of the things around the temple. And what he did was he slept near the eternal flame that was kept burning in the temple, in the worship center, because that was to always be going to show that God's presence all the time. And so Samuel is sleeping in there, and he heard somebody call his name. And he thinks it's Eli. So he goes in there to talk to Eli, and Eli says, what are you doing waking me up? I didn't call you. Go back to the bed. And then the second time he hears his name called, and he goes and he thinks it's Eli again. So he goes back to Eli, and Eli says, quit it. I'm not calling you. Go back to bed. It happens a third time. And he goes back and he wakes up Eli, and Eli finally figures it out. You know, he's kind of lost touch with his spiritual side, but even in his old age, he realizes that God is speaking to him. So he tells Samuel, go back, and when you hear the voice call you, you just say, here I am. And so that's what Samuel did, and that's "Here I Am, Lord" is one of the songs that comes out of that story. And God begins to tell him about Eli and his two sons, which are not very good and who are going to inherit the high priesthood, and they're not going to be good for the nation or good for the faith. And so God's going to replace him. So young Samuel, who is probably 10 years old, has this heavy burden that he's got to tell Eli that God is through with him, that God is going to replace him. But he goes to tell Eli, and Eli begs him to tell him and kind of pries it out of him, and he gets the word that God is going to do something different. And so what different is, we can't even begin to guess, because Samuel becomes the high priest and sort of a prophet at the same time. And the people come to Samuel and say, we want a king. Now, there's no reason to have a king. You've got the families that are divided up in the promised land. You got the 12 tribes of Israel who have taken possession of the promised land and taken possession of different parts. And so Samuel says, you don't need a king. You have only one king, and that's God. That's all you need. And they say, no, we want to have a king like other nations. They wanted to be powerful, to go to war, to expand their nation, to be important in the world. And Samuel says, well, you know what's going to happen. You're going to be taxed, and they're going to take your men and women into the military to fight wars. And that's been true throughout history with political leaders. And Samuel tries to convince them that they don't need a king. But they decide, yeah, they do need a king. And so they convince Samuel, and Samuel goes to God, and they then pick Saul. Saul is a big, strapping guy. He looks handsome. He's the picture postcard of a hero. And he does do pretty well as a king and kind of getting the kingship off the ground. But the problem is he's crazy. He has a mental illness, and he can't be soothed except by playing the harp. And so David comes and plays the harp for King Saul and soothes his anxiety. But David is going to be the new king. That'll be the greatest king who ever existed. But the seeds of his replacement have come to visit him, and he will not be happy, because kings do not like to be replaced. Neither do presidents, neither do senators, neither do heads of companies. They'd like to maintain their power. And so we're going to hear more about how Samuel brings about David as the king of Israel, and more of the story of David. I'll see you next time.